We don't have nearly enough time today, nor do I want to hold you hostage for all the hours it would take to talk about all the things that we are up to with so many of you. But we do want to highlight a few of those things. So I'm going to ask Darcy Milburn, who very smartly sat up here, and Joel Eskovitz, and also Chantel Boyens, I think we have here too. And Julia Simon-Mishel is going to join us momentarily, and Tyler Welch. So if you guys would come join me and come hang out up here in hot seats. I'll do a little talking first before I put you guys on the spot, but come join me on stage. Thanks, guys. I think Julia, oh, you're done with your call. Yes, nailed it, nailing the timing. Love how that works. Okay. Nobody can relate to the, hey, can I have a spot to call my funder before the meeting? No. That's my chair. Need to put you down there. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. Great. So before we have each of these fine folks share just a little bit of some of the things that they have been working on with us, I thought what might be fun, because we're a bunch of nerds, and so our definition of fun is different than maybe some other people, would be for you guys to actually get to hear just a little bit of the outcome of the first theory of change and strategic vision process that the Academy has gone through in quite some time. And that was one of the first challenges and opportunities that I took up with our board when I was stepping into this role. And I also just want to give a shout out to Bill Arnone, who was really helpful in this process as well, and really just could not have been more helpful with this transition. A lot of gratitude to Bill. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I think it would probably be helpful to give just a little bit of a readout here, and we could spend a long time talking about this, but I'm going to do it quite briefly. It had been quite a while since the question had been asked, what is the Academy's vision and what is our place in the policy ecosystem, and how are we working with other organizations and with our members to achieve these goals? And so I'm a person who very much operates with a North Star. I really like to have a North Star. And so this is where we landed after quite some work with the board, and just a lot of gratitude to the board for working on this with me and the staff. But vision of a society where healthcare, economic security, and basic well-being are assured across the lifespan, and each of us is adequately protected against life's risks. Obviously, there's a lot in here that we got started with workers' compensation and Social Security almost a century ago, but still quite a ways to go. How do we achieve this vision? So this is where we get into the, what is our theory of change? So achieving this vision will take a dynamic social insurance ecosystem that provides true security. I'm not going to read every word on this slide to you, but just giving you a sense of where the Academy fits in here. A strong, inclusive social insurance community that comes together across diverse perspectives. We were just hearing a couple of diverse perspectives on this stage, right? It will take us working in that cross-ideological way. And then centering people, and this part is especially important to me as someone who comes at this work out of community-based work, right? Centering people, and especially the needs, expertise, and perspective of people who have received or are likeliest to receive benefits in the work that we do. Inclusive policymaking is a very important part of this North Star. So this is a little bit of what we came up with in terms of what it will take to get to that vision. And then the pillars of our work. The Academy does a lot of things, and it was a really useful and valuable exercise we found to actually ask the question, what are the parts of our work and how do they fit into this larger vision? And so here is what we came up with, and then you're going to hear some of this in action. And you're living some of it in action right now, because this is an example of that network building and member engagement to really nourish that community. So network building and member engagement, convening experts and stakeholders, and you'll hear lots of examples of that in just a moment. Tomorrow's Policy Summit, of course, being another example of that. Developing and advancing policy research, informing and shaping the debate, and then nurturing a strong and diverse pipeline. And again, shout out to the Academy's intern program, which is the beginning but not the end of that type of work. So I'm going to leave the overview there, but thought that might be helpful, both as sort of an update of what came out of that process with the board. Again, a huge thanks to the board for working on this with me, but also as a little bit of context setting for now some of the things that you're going to hear about from some of the Academy members who have been working with us to lead whole bodies of work. And so with that, I'm going to come sit with you guys because I don't like sitting at a podium and looking down over at people weirdly over a shoulder. So here we go, over here. I would love to start with Joel, and I'm going to put Joel on the spot here because one of the things we are incredibly excited to be releasing tomorrow at the Policy Summit is a polling project that the Academy has been working on with AARP. Also a shout out to NIRS, the National Institute for Retirement Security. Tyler Bond is here, and the Chamber of Commerce, Chantel Sheiks is here as a new member, as our partners in this. And the polling project, people may remember from a decade ago what Americans want on Social Security. Well, it's been about 10 years since we asked that question, and so we were so excited to work with AARP to bring that work back. We'll be releasing it tomorrow. Joel, as I put you on the spot, would you mind giving us a sneak peek?
Sure. As Rebecca mentioned, this was work that we last did in 2014. Virginia Reno and Elisa Walker are actually here. We used your report quite a bit to lean on, but this is not a total replica of that. In fact, we brought in a lot of new issues that are indeed being talked about today, such as taxation of benefits, such as funding Social Security from outside the system, things that we would not have thought to ask 10 years ago. But it's really an impressive poll because what it does, what's so special about this poll is it has this trade-off analysis which allows you to get to the core of what people are looking for and to examine each different policy option against each other. So instead of just saying, well, I guess I would pay more in taxes, you can actually see, well, what's the breaking point for someone? Would they pay 1 percentage point more, 2 percentage points more? Things like that. And it was fascinating to see. People obviously love Social Security. That goes without, well, I just did say it. But the program is very well supported, and I think the results of the survey were fascinating because people are willing to do just about anything except for have their benefits cut.
Thank you so much for doing the work with us, Joel. A huge shout out to Deb Whitman as well, who's on the Academy's board, who was a wonderful partner in this too. And we're really excited to release those findings tomorrow. So I'm just going to keep up the shameless plugs and make everyone come to the Policy Summit, but we're excited to release that first thing in the morning tomorrow. The next spotlight that I wanted to bring is related to Social Security, but everyone I think who knows me knows it's very close to my heart. Supplemental security income often gets forgotten as a part of our Social Security system that has really been left on the vine for quite some time. And so one of the things that the Academy has really prioritized in the past year is changing that and really bringing together a whole bunch of folks who might not agree on much else, but who agree it's time to update SSI. And so I've got one of the folks who's been really one of the engines behind that work group with us, and that is Darcy Milburn from the Arc of the United States. So Darcy, thanks for talking a little bit about that work.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I guess first I'd like to express my appreciation for the Academy in being the convener. One of the things that struck me so much in this work are the various types of partners and skill sets that are needed to protect, sustain, and improve a social security. And SSI is no different. Some exciting coalition building work that have happened over the past 2-ish years is a partnership between business interests, faith groups, and disability organizations to push for a increase in the SSI asset limit, which the asset limit has unfortunately been stuck at $2,000 since 1989, and we managed to get, for the first time, a bipartisan, bicameral bill introduced last Congress that would raise that asset limit. And the partnership that many Academy members contributed to included economists that gave us the data that we needed to push for the advocacy, the disability organizations that included the personal stories of people impacted by the SSI asset limit, the businesses and employers who were able to be excellent messengers about just why there is a business interest in raising the asset limit so that people can have money in checking accounts, or people can accept a raise or take on more hours if the asset limit was raised. And then the inclusion of faith leaders has also been enriching the discussion because of the ways that the current SSI asset limit penalizes marriage, and the ways that marriage penalties within SSI can be a barrier to someone marrying the person they love, building the life they want, and participating as full members of their faith communities as well. So it's just been a joy getting to meet so many people from across different sectors, and the Academy has been a very useful forum for building networks and connections between different people who all care about improving this critical lifeline for people with disabilities.
Well, thank you so much for your leadership, Darcy. And, the people often ask, what is the Academy's role? I feel like you just summed it up beautifully, right? We might not be the folks out there who are doing a whole bunch of advocacy, and we don't cross that line into lobbying, but being a convener, right, we can bring the folks together who can think across those different work streams. So I love how you just told that story. I also want to give shout outs to Tracy Groniger from Justice and Aging, who is here and is a member of the Academy's board, and also Will Raderman from the Niskanen Center. The two of them are with Darcy, co-chairs of this work group, and we really appreciate everyone's leadership and time. I also want to give a shout out to Nan Gibson, who may or may not be here, but there she is. She's a new member of the Academy. Thank you to JP Morgan Chase's wonderful support and making that work possible. So I'm going to hand things over to Julia Simon-Mishel, whose call ended perfectly on time for this. Thank you for that. Because another really important work stream for the Academy in recent years has been unemployment insurance. And Indy alluded very briefly to that. But that task force, the Academy's task force on modernizing unemployment insurance, completed its work last year, and you were one of the co-chairs. So share a little bit about that work, Julia.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for having me here. I just wanted to start by acknowledging, I think, what was just said about the role of the Academy as a convener. For those of you who I don't know, I am a legal aid attorney. So I work on the ground with these systems and the people affected by them day in and day out. And I am incredibly grateful that the Academy brought legal aid in, and I think is continuing to do that more and more so as experts in this work. And especially in a field like unemployment, which got a lot of attention very quickly during the pandemic. It was really important for us to have a diverse group of perspectives. For those of you who are not as familiar with unemployment, one of the most kind of incredible aspects about that field is that there has actually been considerable bipartisan agreement on potential changes to the system going back 20 years. And yet, whenever a disaster happens and more attention is brought to the system, we have not necessarily had a cohesive kind of roadmap of different options that the government can utilize to try to modernize and move forward. And I think that's really what we finally accomplished with this report last summer, was bringing together perspectives from legal aid, policy, employers, the chamber, and importantly for unemployment, some real representation from recent federal leadership that we're able to really kind of pinpoint some areas around financing, around benefit access, around technology, which is of course a real hot spot here, and looking at issues that kind of came up for the first time during the pandemic, like massive criminal identity fraud, and how can we build these systems up to do better in the future, while recognizing that although there was a lot of media about the struggles of our state unemployment systems, and we know and address in this report that they are historically underfunded to begin with prior to the pandemic and still to this day. They did a hero's job during the pandemic, providing benefits to people who desperately needed them to stay in their homes, to put food on the table, to keep them out of dangerous situations. And we really wanted to recognize the role that that system played and continues to play, while working together to identify some real opportunities going forward to improve the system across the board. And so I think we're looking to continue to do that. There's a lot more opportunities when it comes to unemployment. And I think one of the incredible things about the Academy is that there's a lot of overlap between how these different programs function, who should be in what program, how should they interact with each other. And I think we're really hoping to be able to lean into that over the next couple of years.
Yeah, thank you so much for your leadership on that task force, Julia. And I also just want to say this is one of the many reasons we're so incredibly excited and lucky to have Michelle Evermore joining us as a senior fellow, because of her leadership as the principal investigator, working with you and others on that task force. And that's really, I think, the hope is that she's going to continue to build out that body of work as a senior fellow with, I guess this puts me on record somewhat disagreeing with Doug, maybe, but finding opportunities where there might be bipartisan agreement in that issue space. And then Tyler, I'm going to come to you next, but so teeing you up to be last for various reasons, but I'm going to go to Chantel next, because one of the areas of work that is newest and really most emerging for the Academy is the intersection of AI and benefits, something that we really can't afford to ignore. And I'll be the first person to say I'm not an expert on AI, but I think many of us have started to realize we need to get smart on this stuff quick, because tech is rapidly becoming policy, as Julia often says when she speaks about these issues as well in the UI space. And so we're incredibly lucky to have Chantel Boyens and her counterpart and colleague Jack Smulligan, who may be here with us today, but will definitely be with us tomorrow at the Urban Institute, serving as principal investigators on a task force on AI and disability benefits. And Chantel, thank you so much for sharing a few words about that task force's work as well.
Sure. Thank you for having me. And just building on kind of the theme of the Academy just doing a great job bringing people together to address important questions. So we have this, the leadership, the Academy brought together folks to talk about forming this task force on AI, emerging technology, and disability benefits. And there's 4 co-chairs. I know some folks are here in the room. We've got Tracy Groninger here, Dave Camp, Jem Burdick, and why am I blanking on the 4th? Henry Claypool. How could I forget? And so we have a terrific set of co-chairs, and we have a task force of folks from across different disciplines coming together to bring expertise on the disability determination process at the Social Security Administration and AI, emerging tech, the tools that are being used currently inside the agency and outside of the agency to address just a range of issues. And, what's important to know is that we have a couple of important context pieces. If you don't know, the Social Security Administration right now is facing a huge backlog of disability cases. So what does that mean? There's a large number of people. It's now close to around 2 million. It's over 1.5 million people in the backlog. It's approaching 2 million. And the wait times are rising. The agency has low funding. Right now, they are trying to avoid furloughing staff at current funding levels. And, the agency is under intense pressure to improve its processes and, do a better job on processing benefits quickly and making sure that people who are entitled to benefits can access them in a timely way. And this is hugely important to the individuals who depend on disability benefits, obviously, and in the public's interest to do this efficiently and effectively. But it's a big mounting crisis. The trajectory is not good, not because the disability numbers are high, but honestly they're lower than they have been. So there's a backlog of cases despite the number of people being at historic lows, which is really important for people to understand. This is not because the disability applications are hugely on the rise, as has happened in the past. At the same time, we have just this incredible emerging technology. We hear about AI every day right now, maybe hourly, about the potential to harness that in various ways to help us solve really thorny problems. But along with AI comes risks. A lot of, SSA is already using versions of AI, I would say small, kind of the lower end of AI in terms of the technology, but they use a lot of data to train models. That's part of AI, and with that, there are special concerns that come with data used in the disability space that could pose risk of bias. So the task force is really, I think, just timely in that it's bringing together these two things and trying to think about them in tandem, to think about both the pressures, the opportunities, the challenges that the agency is facing to address a problem, but also harness this technology and protect individuals, protect beneficiaries. And so the task force is really aiming to kind of bridge the existing guidance that's out there with where things are going and provide a bit of a North Star in terms of principles and guardrails. So we're looking forward to putting that out very soon. And tomorrow there will be a panel where folks will talk about it more and we'll get more into the details of this. So.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So stick around tomorrow for the panel in the afternoon that's AI and benefits. Jack will be speaking as part of that. Other issues will get talked about because obviously AI is now relevant in pretty much the entire benefits landscape, right? And Julia wasn't speaking about that, but unemployment insurance, hugely, right, interconnected there, as well as Medicaid and so many other aspects of the benefits system. So we'll hear a far-ranging conversation tomorrow. But thank you, Chantel, for your leadership and to all of the folks that you gave plugs for. It's been a joy to watch that task force come together and really to watch so many folks who are new to working together, right? Tech leaders in the room with Social Security nerds, in the room with like disability advocates. I mean, it's been really cool to watch and to be part of. So then last, but certainly not least, Tyler Welch, it's great to have you with us. One of the longest running Academy work streams, I believe running for more than 15 years, if that's right, is a workers' compensation study panel, which Tyler is going to give us a little bit of an update on, which will be a wonderful setup to appropriately honor the person who got all that work started for the Academy.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I will say that, I'm sitting here as a one person and a part of a larger report. The study panel that we convene for workers' compensation includes over 25 experts, and we meet once a year to produce this annual report. The most recent annual report was published in November of 2024, and it's available online. And this work stream is made possible because of the work of John Burton, who sort of picked up after the Social Security Administration stopped producing national estimates on workers' comp benefits and costs across states. And that work picked up in the mid-1990s. And has continued to this day at the Academy. And I think workers' compensation is a really interesting program to talk about and bring up, in part because it's a state-based system. And so the Academy's workers' comp report continues to be the only source of national estimates on workers' compensation benefits, costs, and coverage across the U.S. And it includes also information on federal programs as well. And so some of the stuff that we've been trying to deal with in most recent reports, right, as you can imagine, as we sort of come out of the pandemic, the nature of work has changed. And the response of workers' compensation programs to the pandemic and in the years since the pandemic has been really important for our numbers to trace out, right, and try to understand how workers' compensation programs are adapting or changing with the nature of work over time. And that's going to continue to be an important subject. As much as, various things happened during the pandemic, as it came to understanding, how do states view the assumption about if someone gets COVID-19, did that come from the workplace or not, right? And various states approach that differently by presuming that COVID-19 came from the workplace or that it did not. And there's those sort of state-based approaches are going to continue to pop up when it comes to things like long COVID over time as well. And so we're going to keep our eyes on that. Workers' comp is also an interesting policy area because it brings in sort of the insurance industry naturally, right? Because the insurance industry is going to be the largest provider of workers' compensation insurance benefits across the U.S. And workers' compensation insurance right now is at record levels of profitability. And so there's interesting discussions to be had about the insurance industry stakeholders in there as well. I think as we move forward, we're going to continue to try to, in response to Rebecca's comments earlier, think about how workers' comp beneficiaries and how we can put them at sort of the center of policy and bring them into the report a little bit and understand the various stakeholders that are involved in workers' compensation programs across the U.S. And we are working on and continuing to work on a Workers' Comp 101 event. The authors of the report, also the study panel and Academy staff, on a way to get people to understand workers' compensation programs. I think it's one of those social insurance programs. It is the original social insurance program, but it's one of the ones that we sort of forget about. I think in the discussion, and that happens in part because it's state-based system, right? And so there's very little federal movement on workers' compensation programs. But several sort of key and important things happening, right? Including discussions in several states to remove mandates for workers' compensation coverage from employers, right? And sort of thinking about the impact on workers there as well. So there's several really relevant discussions in workers' compensation that we're keeping our eye on in this work stream and hope to expand upon as well.
Thank you so much for all that you do to make that work happen, and to everyone who's involved with the Workers' Comp Study Panel. And I'll say the Workers' Compensation 101 event is going to be really, really fun. I got to have dinner with some of the deepest workers' comp nerds on the panel, and who knew that workers' compensation has a deep history that intersects with pirate ships and the contracts people signed on pirate ships. There's even a history of some of the earliest hieroglyphs actually explaining ancient workers' comp systems, right? You lose a digit, you get a certain number of shekels, right? So all this will, I'm sure, be in that event, because we're not going to let it happen without Alan Pierce, who has lots of good stories. So please join me in thanking all of these wonderful folks. There is so much more work that we could talk about, but just scratching the surface of some of what's up at the Academy.